So the sources of our stresses are either external demands, and we can generally, if there's an external demand, we can specifically identify the person or thing causing it. It can also be an internal perception, and it can also be things from the environment that are not really from any exact place, but that come from something in the environment. And the other part of it is really ourselves, the material, the forces being exerted on. And we'll talk about that at another time. But if you know, it's interesting and helpful to list a list of the kinds of stresses that you have, and then try to identify the source. Because if you can identify a specific source, it makes it much easier to deal with it. Now, you guys know some of the things that we were dealing with, well, still dealing with. You know, if I say things like, you know, foreclosure and bankruptcy and, you know, cancer and, you know, college applications and moving house and, you know, those kinds of things, some of those have specific sources, but some of them don't. Now, and they also have urgencies, you know, like, you know, how urgent is, you know, is it to deal with the cancer? Well, pretty urgent. How urgent, all those things really did have some urgency. And then also they all have some size. And if you look at some of these things, it helps you understand how to deal with them. So like financial pressures is one everybody always relates to, is, okay, what are the financial pressures? Well, truly, that's kind of a vague concept. It's like, okay, there's these financial pressures. Well, what are they? Well, there's a bill right there. If you just look at that bill and deal with that bill, it's not that stressful. But if you've got all these things swirling around in your head and you don't really have, there's some vague uneasiness about it, if you literally write things down and make a list of them and identify them, then you can deal with them directly. It's a direct external demand, and I you know, I deal with that demand and I'm done with it. So I'm going to ask you to list, you know, this will be a discussion time again. What kind of, if you say, what kind of demands do you really have, external demands at this moment in time that are affecting you, that are coming from someone or something? What demands are there at this moment in time that you're dealing with? That was some of what we talked about last week about the area. That, you know, if you have a small area, one of the things to do is to increase the area that the pressures are applied to. So yeah, spread it around. It makes less. So yeah, there are some. I mean, you're actually, one of the external forces on you is my voice and is the visual thing you're seeing on the screen. Those are forces affecting you right this minute in time. The chair you're sitting on, you may feel hunger, maybe you have, you know, a pain somewhere, or, you know, there are things that are in this moment in time that have to be dealt with. But the point is, we've got all this other stuff going on that is constantly affecting us, but it is not, you know, it's back to the little diagram of the guy being pulled in all different directions. You just let go of them. It's like, oh, there's a thought that I have to go do this, you know, I need to go to the grocery store, I need to, oh, it's not. But now, how do you do that in a way that doesn't ignore it? Because letting go is not the same as ignoring. And that's a big distinction. So letting go of the stress and the ignoring are two separate things. One of the, you know, things that's important is to have some outside mass that will, you know, writing things down, you create something outside of yourself to exert a force on you later on. That's a good thing. Just like Ian pushing on me, you know, I want to be forced to do things sometimes, and writing it down so I can look at it later is a way to make sure that it will be, you know, it will affect me later on. But while we're doing what we're doing, you know, if I worried about all the different things that were affecting us over these last 6 months, every minute of every day, I wouldn't move. I would have just sat there and not done anything. And believe me, I was at that point. When I sent out my first email, I was at that point, like, I'll just sit here and just ignore the world. But it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So it's like, at this moment in time, what do you need to do? Now, the problem is you've got all those things swirling in your head. And I don't know about, you know, I'm going to tell you something that I find is useful when I have all these different things. Like, absolutely, no, this is not about me. Like I said, I'm the expert at having stress, not necessarily on what to do about it. But I am as far as the structure of how it relates to the physical world. And that's exactly the kind of thing I'm talking about, is if you create that, that is now a piece of something that can sit on your wall, and you could look at that, and every time you look at it, it will exert a force on you. And that's not a bad thing. Now, if you get too many of them, it might be overwhelming, but, you know, then that means you have to do something. So that is a good, I like the Post-it approach. Again, back to a force comes from mass. Writing it down on a Post-it is a form of mass. And now we want it to exert a force on us. And if we don't, it's floating around. The thoughts don't have as much form. And we're afraid that, you know, one of the places we get stressed is because we don't, you know, we're afraid we're going to lose those good thoughts. So writing it down is exactly one of the kinds of things to do, so you can have it exert a force on you at a later time. And that's one of the things about, how do I let go of it for now? So that's definitely one of the approaches of dealing with the demands that we have on us. So the demand can't, you know, like I'm saying, right now, really the only truly external demands you have is the chair you're sitting on, you know, is you know, and the, you know, the sounds, and the, you know, there's some very specific things that you have to be dealing right now. But what you're saying is there's other thoughts coming in. Those are demands. So they are being things that you're exerted on right now. You don't have to have them, but they are. And so how can you deal with them is to let go of them. But how can you let go of them without worrying about losing them? And so that's the sequence of events, is you can create something outside of yourself that can exert a force back on you. So it's physics, right? So you guys are using physics, whether you know it or not. This is a form to use, you know, sometimes the vague thoughts that we've got are one of the most insidious things that really we go through. And if you write something down, you can identify its source. And oops, did I already put source? Yeah, the source could be somebody or something specific. Like, I've got this bill to pay, or I've got, you know, the, you know, the date of this workshop you're saying, you know, is coming at this time, or I've got paperwork to fill out, or, you know, whatever they may be. You can write those down, and some of them write down, and you may think, you know, just I'm worried about blah blah blah. I'm worried that you know, something's going to be hard, or it's not going to go well, or those are real, and they should be written down too. And then also just the environment. I mean, right now, I think there was I don't know if you guys saw it, I sent out Alicia, who's she's actually working at the polls right now. She was on last week, but she couldn't this week. Some other people too. But she sent something to me about the social the environment that we're dealing right now. Like 62% of the people said that we're stressed about our political and social environment right now. So that's pretty significant. So we're dealing with all of those, and if you know, and what can you do to you know, deal with them? So that's the source. And then the urgency is just in number of days, you know, like, you know, I've got 5 days to get this done. I've got, you know, if it's immediate, 0, you know, or it can be, you know, I got to get it done in the next hour or two, you know, and I do it this way because if you can write them down, you can also do it in your head. And I'm sure many of you do it in your head, but if you think about it this way, this is how you prioritize, really, is the urgency. The size is, you know, really, small, medium, large, and extra large is what's the extra large. If you identify that, everything else is relative. So this is a way to, and sometimes I will literally write things down, because if you write them down, now they're outside of you and you can now deal with them and then come up with a strategy. And once you have a strategy, it takes some of the worry off of it. So that's why I put that on there. Okay, so let's talk about the strategies. Going now lets you be present in the moment, and that's a term that, you know, is used all the time about, you know, being present. And then you're not stressed. Like, I've got things in the past, I've got things in the future, but I'm not dealing with those right now. But what if, what I used to think about with that though is, well, what if you're planning? Then you're thinking in the future, so how am I not being present? You know what I mean? Like, I must not be being present if I'm planning for the future. But that's not really the case, because you're in the present, you know, planning something, but you're thinking about it in the future. So there was a point I was going to make there, and I can't remember what it was. Oh, I mean, well, just that, you know, still doing that at this point in time. Okay, so sometimes there's like 15 things that really I could be doing, and I've got my list, but still I'm like, I don't know which one to do. I could run around like a chicken with my head cut off, and I do that sometimes. I have to say that I, you know, get very all over the place. But sometimes what I've learned, because I've had to learn to be better at dealing with stress, is that if I just sit still and kind of listen, or not even, you know, just sit, not, you know, and eventually something is going to pull me. You guys ever have that experience? You just sit still and let that, whatever the thing is, kind of make itself known. Because there is something that will identify itself as the most urgent and the biggest thing to do. So those are the combinations of making a decision on what to do in the moment.